Hi, everyone. Good morning for me and good evening for some of you, I'm sure. Thanks for joining. My name is Katie McQuarrie. I am with Vantage Point MBA. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a second, but just wanted to say hello, hi, and I will share my screen now so you can see the presentation. Okay, so the topic we're going to talk about today is three mistakes to avoid in your MBA applications. So, basically, in our years of working with MBA applicants, a couple of things have popped out to us that seem to be, a fairly common occurrence that people, pitfalls that people will sometimes succumb to that, can have a negative impact on their success in the application process. So, we wanted to just dive in a little bit today. Some of you might be in the process of submitting your round one applications. This would be a great thing to go back and check before you hit submit. Make sure that these don't apply to you. Also relevant for interviews that might come up here in the near future for your round one applications. Also, some of you may be looking to apply in round two. So, certainly very timely, as now is a great time to get started on your round two applications. It may seem like you have, a lot of time. You do still have a few months, but putting forth strong applications really does take a lot of time. People sometimes underestimate that. So, now is a great time to get started. Okay, so that is an overview of our topic for today. Want to tell you a little bit about Vantage Point MBA. So we've been around since 2016. Um, we feel like we've distinguished ourselves as an innovative, dedicated, and passionate provider of MBA admissions consulting. Certainly recognized by Poets and Quants and GMAT Club. I know, have a lot of strong ratings and reviews there as well. What makes us different, in our opinion, is that we're the highest touched, most personalized MBA application coaching, and we have a mentors first mantra. So our coaches are all passionate about, um, mentoring the candidates we work for, forming a real solid personal relationship, getting to know everything about you so that we can pull out the details and the facets of your profile that will appeal most to the admissions committees of your target schools. We don't take, a very high number of clients for each consultant, which means that we have the time and resources to dedicate, the most attention possible to each individual person. As I said at the beginning, my name is Katie McQuarrie. I am a senior consultant with Vantage Point. I have been with Vantage Point almost since, let's see, I guess for the last 5 years, so close to perhaps one of our more senior or experienced consultants that we have on staff. I love what I do, and I think I grow each year along with each of my clients, and I really enjoy seeing them achieve the results that they hope for. Before I went into MBA admissions consulting, I went to Kellogg for my MBA. I also spent a number of years as an alumni interviewer. So interviewed applicants after they had submitted their applications when they got to the interview stage. I really enjoyed that. Obviously, couldn't continue doing that in my current line of work. It would be a conflict of interest, but I did really enjoy that when I did it. From a career standpoint, before I went to business school, I worked in banking at a large bank. I went to business school to transition to an internal finance and strategy role. I wanted to sort of see the impact of my work on a longer time horizon. I was also really drawn to consumer products, so products that consumers see and touch that you can, see in the store yourself, talk about with your family and friends. I always found consumer behavior really interesting. So those, from a career standpoint, aside from what I'm doing now, that's where my background lies. All right, so to get started on the topic of the day, 3 mistakes to avoid in your MBA applications, I wanted to start with a caveat. So when I say mistakes, I don't want to scare anyone. There's really nothing, that what we're going to talk about today, they're not deal breakers. Most mistakes aren't, and mistakes, things that people do in their applications that might, raise some questions and the adcoms had, they're not going to be deal breakers on their own. But, if it's a very competitive process and if an admissions committee is comparing you to someone else with similar background and experience, and, you have one of these pitfalls in your application and that other person doesn't, it could give them the edge. So we're trying to set everyone up for success here and, try to make sure that that is not you. That doesn't stack up well versus the competition. So, as I said at the beginning, if you're in the process of submitting your round one applications, this can be a great quick check before you hit submit. Go through, read your short answers, read your your essays, and make sure that these pitfalls don't apply to what you're about to submit. Also, as you're preparing for the interview, really think about how you're going to frame your answers, making sure not to fall into any of these traps. Okay, so mistake number one, and this is something that is super tempting. I get it, but it really looks bad to be negative. Even if you feel like you were dealt a tough, you know, hand of cards, and you want the adcom to understand that, you really don't want to put down your boss, your teammates, or your company. It's okay to, if you're telling a story. So, for instance, Kellogg, one of the essays is, tell us about a time that you've demonstrated leadership. Perhaps you had to demonstrate leadership because it was chaotic in your workplace and there were a lot of problems and people weren't, acting as you felt that they should. And that's why you needed to assume this leadership role. It's okay to give the context of what was going on and frame it up appropriately, but present it factually, not with emotion. But then shift the focus quickly to your actions. You want to be the star of your essays, not at the expense of others, but really just to point out, the skills and ability you have to manage through ambiguity and, really drive impact for your organization. So this one can be, a little bit delicate. And so I thought it might be helpful to have an example. So this was one client's part of his essay where in the what not to do, it was from, he applied the first time. We did not work together, but he shared what he had submitted with me. And he was describing a tough situation at work in the context of telling a story of, where he assumed leadership. And so what he said was, at this critical juncture, when my boss should have taken the reins and established control, she instead faded into the background, neglecting to establish timelines, failing to maintain communications with the client, and providing no direction to our team. So I think it's pretty clear that, that is putting down his boss. And it just doesn't read well. As I said, he was a reapplicant. So, the first example under what not to do that did not get him accepted. The next year, we actually told the same story, but we framed it a little bit differently. So, what he wrote the following year was, I was given the goal of increasing sales, but not the steps to follow or the stakeholders to engage. So that's where, he's sort of saying without saying that his boss, didn't really establish control or maintain communication. So he's saying, but not the steps to follow or stakeholders to engage. So he's just setting the stage that there was a lot of ambiguity. By combining multiple data sets and consulting local experts, I worked through the ambiguity to build a solid solution. So obviously there was a lot more detail that went into this essay, but I think it shows the from to of, framing the same story in a way, number one, that's sort of on the former negative. And then, in the second example, spinning that in a way that really allow his abilities to come through. So that's mistake number one. Don't be negative. Don't put down your boss, your teammates, or your company. Mistake number two. We're going to call this being a wanderer. We love the quote, not all those who wander are lost. And that is true. What we mean by that is you might be going into the MBA for a couple years of sort of soul searching, figuring out what your longer term path is going to be. That's okay for the most part. And I think, that's true to some extent with most people that enter business school. But for the purposes of the application, you need to pick a path and commit to it. If you don't, the admissions committee is really going to feel like you didn't put the effort in to research what post-MBA careers are out there, which are interesting to you, and those that might fit with your, the criteria that you're bringing to the table. So what it's reasonable that you'll be hired for. And they are looking for people that have really sat down and thought and had coffee chats and researched, what they want to do after business school and why. And you might be portraying a little more certainty than you actually have, and that's okay, but you need to pick a path and be clear about it. So, for an example from two, so needs improvement. This was from a past client. My goal is to continue as a healthcare professional and lead meaningful initiatives. Okay, so that, makes sense. He wants to stay in healthcare, got that. He wants to have impact, totally get it, all true. But what does that really mean? What role does he want to have and what part of the healthcare industry does he want to work? There's a lot of vagueness there. So after working with him, he got to the point where his goal was, and there's more detail that he went into, but just for the purposes of having a sentence to put in this presentation, he changed it to, my post-MBA goal is to join a healthcare consulting firm as an associate where I can gain exposure to multiple facets of the industry. So he honed that goal into, I want to work in healthcare too. I want to work in healthcare consulting. He had specific role that he was targeting. He also mentioned a couple of specific healthcare consulting companies that he would target. So even down to the company level, that, those specifics can resonate well with the admissions committee. And circling back to, maybe you are going into business school wanting to, sort of see what's out there, figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life and your career. What you put in these essays, no one's going to hold you to that. You can always change your mind when you get to campus or, the day after you hit submit on your applications. What you put forth in your application should be, at this point in time, my best bet, what I'm most likely to pursue is this path, this role, this type of company. That's what you want to communicate. Although you want to say, my goal is to, you don't want to, leave ambiguity in your answer. Although I will say, having gone through the MBA recruiting process myself, I think what you'll find, especially, you know, for, the internship, you get to campus, you sort of have to know what you're going to be recruiting for, especially if it's one of the industries that recruit pretty early. Investment banking, consulting definitely fall into that. Those are interviews that take a lot of preparation, a lot of networking. So, you're really going to run yourself ragged if you're trying to do both, for instance. You would have multiple coffee chats a day, you would have to go to all different events, and you might not do both well. And so, I think a lot of people do go into business school thinking that they can really just explore everything, and in reality, I think they quickly find that that's not true. But again, the mistake here that we want to call out is, in your application, be specific about your post MBA goals and why you're pursuing the MBA. Don't lay out various paths you might take. Don't be too vague when it comes to your goals. Really pick a path and stick with it. All right. Last mistake is coming across as a robot. So, when people begin the MBA application process, they quickly learn that the AdCom wants to know more about them than just what they do for work, what their GMAT score is, and what their GPA was. They want to know kind of what you are passionate about, what drives you in life, what motivates you, what your values are. They want to know about how you grew up, what you like to do outside of work, what extracurriculars you enjoy pursuing. So I think people are often surprised and perhaps a little uncomfortable with getting personal for the purposes of the MBA application, but it's really necessary. Especially if you're coming from an overrepresented demographic. So, you're a consultant and there's so many other consultants applying for the same spots in an MBA class. You really have to distinguish yourself. You've probably worked on similar types of consulting projects. Maybe they'll have slight nuances, but in order to distinguish yourself, you have to dig a little bit deeper and get comfortable sharing more about yourself than, perhaps is on the surface of your resume. This is a really hard process to figure out, what are your values, what are your passions, your motivations. You might have been really busy in the last couple of years and not sat down and given this a ton of thought. So one of the things that we work with our clients on upfront, and it's, I think, one of the most important things that we do, is we help them go back through their life and think about their most pivotal experiences. What really changed them? What opened their eyes to, perhaps a new path they could take, a new direction? What were some of their favorite things that they've ever done? And we, write those all out, and we try to find commonalities between them. Why they pursued them, does that reflect a central trait about themselves? So this is a big exercise that we do. If you're interested in doing a little bit more on this, we do have some articles on our blog about uncovering your personal brand, and this is sort of the category that falls into. So just know that this process, requires you to get a little uncomfortable and a little personal. So know that, and just do the work up front to really figure out how you're going to present yourself and how you're going to differentiate yourself. Okay, so that's all that I have prepared. I'm going to close out of the presentation in a minute and answer some questions. If you can type them into the chat box. But before I do, here is my contact information. We have a great Instagram that, we publish tips and reminders and links to blog articles that we're publishing, specific school essay tips. So, how to best write your HBS essay, for instance. So we love to have you follow us, and we think that our followers find that helpful. So there's our Instagram there. Also, if you are considering using an MBA admissions consultant, we'd love to schedule a free consultation, talk about how we work, talk a little bit about your specific profile. So that is, you can see there in the middle, the website where you can request that free 30-minute consultation. And then at the top there is my email address. All right, I'm going to click out. We can answer some of your questions. All right. Okay, so it looks like we have one question right now, and I'm not sure if it's a little facetious, but I think that it's true. So why is MBA admission so tough? Yeah, I mean, I think it's a numbers game. There are only so many seats in each class, and a lot of people that desire the education. So yeah, it is tough. I get it. I've been there. I went through the process. I obviously applied myself, and had success. Had areas where I was not as successful in my own process. But I think everybody sort of winds up in the place that fits best with them. For me, that was Kellogg. But people on our team went to all the different schools and all had an amazing experience. So I think what I would say too is that, while sometimes we focus on sort of the top tier of schools, that isn't always, the end all be all. There's a lot of programs out there, and I think it's important to figure out what you're looking for out of the MBA and then identify the programs that are the best fit for you. Okay, this is a great question. So he says, I've done a master's and I want to do an MBA. How will a master's degree affect the application? So, if you look in many of the top programs, class profiles where they talk about the background of the students that ended up enrolling in their program, you'll see that a pretty high proportion of them do have advanced degrees before they pursue the MBA. So I think it's totally reasonable and great. And I think it's another data point that you can use, assuming you got a strong GPA or grades, another data point that you can use to demonstrate that you would be successful in business school. So I think it can be a positive for your application. I think the one watch out is, you want to make sure that you really convince them that you need the MBA. So if you already have this advanced degree and you're using it to do a certain thing with your career, what are you looking to do down the road that you absolutely need this MBA degree for? So I think being clear with the why MBA argument is especially important for those who do have another advanced degree, just to show that you're not going to school just to go to school, but that you pursue each degree with a specific outcome in mind. All right. So, and the other question here is in the similar vein, if you've done another MBA in your mid-30s and you've done, or if you want to pursue an MBA in your mid-30s and you've already done one in your 20s, how do you justify that? Again, I really think, how are you thinking about it in your mind? What doors is the second MBA opening for you? I think it's specific to your situation, but you do have to have a pretty compelling argument as to why you are pursuing the second MBA degree to convince the admissions committee that you're a worthwhile add to the class. All right, I am 39 years old. Is it possible my age could be a disadvantage as an applicant? Yeah, I mean, it could. I think that, if you look again back at the class profiles of the programs you're targeting, a lot of times they will publish an age range. See if there are other people in the class that are in your similar age bracket. I think that can be a clue as to whether, you are maybe better off like applying for an executive MBA program or another degree like that, where the class profile indicates that, it's more commonly pursued by people in your age bracket. That said, I think there are always outliers. And so if you can make a solid case as to, why an MBA will enable you to get to the next level in your career, I think, it's worth a shot. But again, talk to people that have pursued the same program at an advanced age. Did they get in? I think you should use these data points so that you're not kind of wasting your time if it's not, going to be reasonable, or if you should sort of target other programs or other, types of programs like executive MBA versus a full-time MBA. All right. I'm pursuing a CFA. Would that be advantageous for my MBA application? So I think I view the CFA as similar to another advanced degree. So I think my answer would be similar to what, I said for the prior questions. You really just need to talk about, why an MBA on top of your CFA is necessary to achieve your post-MBA career goals. CFA, if you're, really trying to get that finance knowledge to go into investment management or something, what is the MBA going to provide you to allow you to be successful in that career that the CFA, will not? So at the end of the day, I think, it can be advantageous in terms of demonstrating that you can handle pretty quantitative coursework, because obviously the CFA is not easy to pass. So kudos to you for that. But just make sure that you justify and make a strong argument for why the MBA is necessary. All right, which factors can counterbalance an average or low GRE or GMAT score? This is a great question, and it's an important one. So, GPA or GMAT or GRE, whatever it is, those are obviously quantitative things that the school will look at. If you are on the lower end, that's fine. I would look again back at the class profile and see what the range, not just the average that these programs enroll, but what is the range? Whereas the average might be 735 on the GMAT, the range might be 680 to 780. So they're certainly letting in a proportion of the class that is lower than their actual average. So it's not impossible, but especially if you're coming from more of an overrepresented demographic, I think those numbers are important, and you want to, be competitive with other applicants that are similar to you. If you are not, I think things that you can do to help offset that weakness in your application. You can take some ancillary coursework either through a local community college, maybe an econ or finance or other business relevant courses. Get a grade, make sure that it's something that's graded, and obviously do your best and get an A, get a really strong grade in it. There's also the HBX core modules you can do online. Those can be, it's an investment in time and money, but it can be a good way to demonstrate that you can handle MBA level coursework. So I think ancillary coursework is another. And then regardless, definitely address this weakness in the optional essay. So you can say, yes, my GMAT is lower than the school average, but I feel I'm prepared to handle the MBA level coursework because of X, Y, and Z. Maybe your work is quantitative in nature. Maybe you have taken this ancillary coursework. You come up with examples in support of why they shouldn't be concerned about your ability to succeed in the coursework. And you use that optional essay. Also, you can ask your recommenders to provide examples of times where you were able to learn complex material very quickly. That can be another way to support your ability to succeed in business school. All right, all right. Okay, here, I'm gonna move down here. So if We are non-US international applicants who are self-employed who can write your letters of recommendations if our business clients do not speak English. This is a tough one. This is a tough one. And, you obviously do need English speaking recommenders. I would say maybe if you have business mentors or even going back to university professors that might be able to, to provide this support for you, that's one option. You could also use like a business partner. Clients in general are, it's a little, even if they are English speaking, is a little tough because it's hard for the school to see them as objective if, they're clients of yours, or if you're a client of them or something like that. So, it is a watch out, but I understand the, constraints of being self-employed, that you might not have, a boss in the true sense, like many people do. Okay. For those who've maxed out their GMAT attempts, can they still try the GRE? You would have to check with the testing authorities or, the company that does that. I'm not an expert, but I believe you probably could. It's a good question. All right. I've not held any leadership positions. What should I do to get into a good business school? So, I think leadership is not always managing. Whereas leadership in the formal sense, you might think of, having employees report to you. A lot of people that get into business schools don't have that. Leadership, I think you should think of it a little more broadly. Perhaps you've spearheaded a project and taken it from the beginning stages to fruition. Maybe you saw an opportunity of a work stream that could be optimized and you took the initiative to improve that. So leadership doesn't have to be managing. I think leadership means a variety of things. And so I would encourage you to think more broadly because you might have leadership and you might not even know it. All right, I am going to wrap up now because I got to the end, I believe, of the questions here. Again, you have my email address. I think it's also probably on the YouTube snapshot. So reach out, follow us on Instagram if you'd like. We'd love to have you. All right, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you to GMAT Club for hosting us. All right, have a good day or evening, everyone.